All right, hey class, great to see you all. Welcome to week 4. Congratulations. We're now more than halfway through the class. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying the material, learning and growing, staying up with it. Real quick, as we always do at the beginning of the week, I want to share a little bit about last week, debrief it, and then talk about this coming week. So real quick, last week, week 3 debrief, we talked about execution leadership. We've been talking about convictions for leadership. Then we talked about being a visionary leader. And now we're getting into how do you execute on that vision? We talked about it generally last week, and now we're going to get into some different categories over the next few weeks of how do we execute on the vision that we have or that the Lord has for the church. We wrapped up a book, Designed to Lead. Great book. You guys wrote a paper on it, reflecting on it. Great chance to get to review some core leadership principles. Then we got into a new book, Sticky Teams. Again, a bit of a goofy title, goofy cover, but such an important and practical book for church leadership. Some great stuff in there. So this week, we're going to talk about board leadership. One of those things that might come across as dry, maybe not that much fun, and yet is so important. If you think about under Christ, the elder board, the ruling board of the church, is the next highest level of authority. And so if it plays that much of a role in the church, we want to do it really well. We don't want to do it poorly. So it's important for us to reflect and think about how is it supposed to function? Where can it go wrong? How can we as leaders help it go the right direction and function really well? So quick overview of our week. As always, you can find this in the syllabus unit description. Students will consider the role of a pastor in leading a church board. Students will be able to exhibit knowledge of board governance theory, models, and common challenges. Objectives: number 1, demonstrate a basic understanding of how a board governs an organization. Number 2, identify the effects of church size on the function of the board. And number 3, identify common pitfalls of a church board. All right, so we'll continue to work through Sticky Teams, which paints a great picture of some of the challenges of board leadership. He tells some personal stories, some experiences that I as well could share with you that I've had myself. He gives some very practical advice. I've used Sticky Teams in board meetings before. I've photocopied a page or two and brought it in, had the guys read it, and then discuss some of the principles there. There's just some really practical principles that you can share with your board that will help you navigate and avoid unhealth and have healthy process, healthy meetings. So I encourage you to dig deep into that, mark it up, save it for use in future times. We're also going to look at a super important article by Tim Keller on the impact of church size on how leadership functions. Something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. This article is incredible. I think it's eye-opening the first time you read it. We actually share it with elders, deacons, staff at the church to help them have a sense of how the size of the church impacts how we function. One of the arguments that Keller makes at the beginning of the article is that actually going from a church of one size to a church of another size is a bigger change for most pastors than going from a church in one denomination to another denomination. Now, that's quite a statement, but I think it's true. The difference in how a church operates at 200 people to 500 to 2,000 is drastic. And so if you're not aware of what those differences are and what it might look like and feel like as a leader, and you go into those expecting them to be the same or feel the same, you're going to be shocked. You're going to go for a ride. And so you want to have that in your mind and understand what it's like if you serve at churches of different sizes, or if the church that you're at grows through different size barriers, and how to navigate that. So really important stuff. We're also going to look at one form of board governance, the Carver model, or the policy governance model as it's called. While this might feel like really dry material for you as you're reading, some of you might really enjoy it. Some of you are going to find that this is really dry theory about how a board ought to function. The board is the highest authority under Christ in the church, and so we don't want to do it poorly. We want to do it really well. And so it's worth taking the time to reflect on, how is this thing supposed to function? How can it go wrong? Because the consequences, maybe you've experienced this, but the consequences of the board going sour, the board going unhealthy, are drastic. And we don't want to have that. We want to lead well as pastors, as leaders, and as the board. So let's think carefully about how it functions. All right, so let's talk about board leadership, our material for this week. I could share with you plenty of stories, but in my own experience, I became a lead pastor. After seminary, I served as an associate pastor for a couple of years, and then I became a lead pastor. And walking into that seat, I realized how much I had not been prepared or trained to lead a board. there I am in my 20s, a young man, and I'm leading this team of elders in their 50s, 60s, 70s, people who have been around the church for a long time, and they're looking to me to lead them through processes, through meetings, and I've got the board and the staff competing for control, for the right to approve different things going on in the church. I've got factions within the board, different committees and groups within the board, kind of arguing back and forth and disagreeing with each other and fighting for power and control. I've got individuals on the board who have very different opinions and are on different pages and trying to figure out how to help them work together. I've got a board and a congregation who are differing in how they view what the role of each other is. People in the congregation say, well, we don't trust the board. The congregation should vote on these kind of things. The board saying, well, we think we should have the say, but we're a little scared of what the congregation will think of what we say. And of course, you got everybody having different opinions about what the role of the pastor is in the midst of all of that. Some people saying, well, the pastor's just supposed to be a shepherd. He's just supposed to preach and pray and visit people in the hospital and let the elders and the board just, do their thing in leadership, and the pastor shouldn't play a role. You've got other people saying, well, the pastor should be, the main guy, explaining to us how it should work, giving us the vision, all those kind of things. So you can have people on very different pages about how a board should work in the church. And so we're going to think about it. Bottom line, I was extremely unprepared when I went into that role. And so I would love for you to be prepared, equipped, at the very least, have some great resources in your back pocket that you can think back to these conversations, to this week, and say, all right, I remember that stuff. I'm going to go back and reread it. I'm going to go back and revisit it and think through, how is this supposed to work? How can I take steps in the right direction? So there's tons of really good stuff in the readings you're going to get into this week. I think it's a great starting place for thinking about the board, but I want to give you just a few points myself to help prime you for the material and get you started. Okay, so here we go. Number one, what is a board? What in the world is this thing that we call a board? I've got a few quotes I want to share with you. First, number one, Peter Drucker, the great speaker on management, says, there is one thing that all boards have in common: they do not function. Now, he says that tongue in cheek, of course, but I think the more you work in leadership and work with boards, you'll find that boards are very imperfect things because they're full of imperfect people, right? We're broken and sinful. We don't always get going in the right direction. When you bring a group of people together and put them in charge of an organization, all kinds of things come out. It's an interesting adventure. And so dysfunctional boards is actually more the norm than functional boards are. I have been blessed to serve with some very functional, very high-functioning boards. And yet the norm is to have a board that really struggles. So you shouldn't be shocked or surprised when you walk in and realize that your board, if you're a new pastor or church leader, whatever role you play, do you realize that they're struggling? Because that's pretty normal. And so that's why I want to give you tools to work on that. From John Carver, from the article that you're going to read this week, I'll just share a short 2 paragraphs. Here we go. An extraterrestrial observer of board behavior could be forgiven for concluding that boards exist for several questionable reasons. They seem to exist to help the staff, to lend their prestige to organizations, to rubber stamp management desires, to give board members an opportunity to be unappointed department heads, to be sure that staff gets the funds that they want, to micromanage organizations, to protect lower staff from higher staff management, and sometimes even to gain some advantage for board members as special customers of their organizations, or to give board members a prestigious addition to their resumes. All right, so he's sort of poking fun, making fun of all these sort of poor reasons that we think that boards exist, what they're supposed to do. He goes on, but these observations, accurate though they frequently are, simply underscore the disclarity of the board's rightful job. Despite the confusion of past and current board practices, we begin in this article with the assertion there's only one central reason to have a board. Simply put, the board exists, usually on someone else's behalf, to be accountable that its organization works. The board is where all authority resides until some is given away, in parentheses, delegated, to others. This simple total authority, total accountability within the law or other external authorities is true of all boards that truly have governing authority. Okay, so he's saying that the board is simply the ruling body of people. This is a team of people that are the highest level of authority in the organization. For us in the church, we know that Christ is the ultimate highest authority, but then the board is the one that plays that role under Christ of having highest level authority. Okay, so they bear authority as well as responsibility or accountability as John Carver said it. So that's where the board is now. We know right away, of course, that even though they have total authority and total responsibility, they can't do it all themselves. So then we have to talk about this thing called delegation. So let's talk about that. And this is where the rub comes in a ton. The relationship between the board and the staff, or the board and other entities it's related to. But this is where the rub starts to come in. Who's responsible for what? How does that work? Boards can't do it all. You'll see as you read the Keller article that in smaller churches, boards end up being the people who do it all. But as you grow, that simply can't continue to be the case. And so they must delegate. And how do you do that well? We're going to talk about that more next week when we talk about management. But I want to say just a couple of things about it right now. I'll say 2 keys. Number 1, an important key for delegation is clarity of roles. You have to be clear about who is responsible for what, who has authority to do what. You have to dole out both authority and responsibility. The board is still ultimately responsible, but they share some of that down, usually to staff members, sometimes to committees. We can talk about that intersection and how that works. But they have to be able to say, hey, we're going to delegate this job to you and the authority to get it done. And at the end of the day, you will come back and be accountable to us, and we're accountable before the Lord and the congregation for how it got done. Tons we could talk about that. We'll get into that further in the future. We're talking about management. The other key is simply trust. I'll share with you that in the board that I work under now, an incredibly healthy and high-functioning board, there's a lot of trust. In other boards that I've served with, there has not been a lot of trust, and it makes all the difference in the world, right? So for our board, we actually have very short meetings. We actually don't vote on very many things because we trust each other and know each other super well. We're a very small board. We do a lot of communication, so there'll be, we have meetings once a month, but in between, we'll just email or text or call back and forth a little bit. One of the things that I know as a leader is that I can reach out to them and just get their feedback, their thoughts, their opinion. I find that actually the more I communicate with them, then the more we're on the same page. And so I don't need to ask them to vote on everything I do. I'm able to communicate, make sure that we're on the same page, and I'm able to continue moving ahead as a leader and simply give reports at the end of the month and only have votes on really important, bigger, more dramatic sort of things like budgets, like building projects, sort of, the big things. I've been a part of other boards where there's not as much trust and that don't function as well in terms of their process and structure. And so every month you're going back there's numbers of proposals and recommendations to vote on, and everything kind of gets bogged down. And it's, well, we want to do this, but we got to wait a couple of months because we got to share it with the board and then give them a month to think about it and then come back and then vote on it maybe once or twice. There are times for that, but then there's times when that doesn't make sense. And so trust is such... It's the oil in the engine, right? It's the lubricant that makes things run and function and work well together. And if it dries up, then there's rub. Things get uncomfortable, things don't flow and move as they ought to. So much we could talk about there, and you'll hear more about that in the reading, but wanted to prime you for that important topic. Number 3, last one I've got for you, guard the gate. You'll hear Larry Osborne talk about that in Sticky Teams. The structure of the board matters. The process that you go through as a board matters. But if you have the right people, it makes all the difference in the world. And especially in the church, we're not just talking about great leaders or managers. We're talking about godly people. People who love the Lord, who have great character, who are on board with the mission, who love the church. When you have those kind of people on the board, it makes all the difference. And so one of the things that you do want to work towards is having a great process for how do you select new board members. What is the process for that? In many churches, it's simply a popularity contest. Once a year, people vote, and the highest vote getters end up on the board. Is that really the best way? Or, for example, for us, we have a team of people that we seek suggestions from the congregation, and then we put these people through a process. They go to a class, they have to write essays, they have to do readings. We find out if their beliefs are on the right page, we find out if their character is healthy. We ask questions about, are you in line with the mission of the church? All that kind of stuff. So you want to guard the gate. Now that's not always easy to do. If you're a pastor walking into a church, they might not have a process for that right away. It might take some time, and you might have to earn some trust before you can put a process in place to do that. But it's so important to make sure that we end up with the right people on the board. It makes a world of difference. you'll learn and you'll experience as you work with boards too. You'll get to know that those relationships are so important. Sometimes there's some people on the board that you just need to take out to lunch every once in a while, be able to hear them out, be able to talk things through with them. That can help. That can make sure people are on the same page. Sometimes, with the way that you create an agenda and plan out meetings, you just need to give time for, hey, we've got a big decision in front of us. We're going to schedule a whole meeting. We're actually going to go around the table and let each person share their thoughts on this, okay? And then we'll take some time to pray about it and vote on it. There's different ways you need to go about it, but letting board members be heard, helping them feel part of the process, get to have a say before you go to the place of voting or moving forward, whatever it might be. And ultimately, we're talking about people management, we're talking about change management, all the things come into play. One of those things, again, we don't talk about it enough, but it makes such a difference in how the church is led. So praying for you this week as you study that, and blessings as you continue to grow as a leader.